When he was done having his fun, he stood up and then dismissed me. He asked me what was wrong. He asked me, like, what's wrong? That's how he asked me. And then I said nothing. I just have to get used to the way things work in this house.
You did not object to what he had done to you at the time?
I wouldn't have dared to object.
In what state were you, or let me ask you this, did you then leave the room?
Yes.
In what state were you when you left the room?
I was shocked and I was upset. I was very confused, trying to understand what just happened. Because he did say I should come and see him later. So I had a lot of questions in my mind.
Why did you not scream for help during the assault while he was busy molesting you?
As I said, I was too shocked to say anything. I was too shocked to do anything. Even if I did, that house is full of his loyalists. It's not like they would have done anything to assist me.
You didn't know that, ma'am. Do you agree?
No, I knew that.
You knew they would allow him.
The church itself is full of his loyalists.
So you say you knew or you believed that they would allow him to continue doing that to you. They wouldn't intervene.
Yes.
Is that why you did not scream for help?
I screamed because I was too shocked to scream.
Sure. So to discuss, we're joined by Lulama Nair, Chair of the Commission for Gender Equality, Alexander Fenter, Pastor at the Vineyard Christian Fellowship of Churches, Toko Mkwanazi Aluva, who is the Chair of the Commission for the Promotion and Protection of the Rights of Cultural, Religious and Linguistic Communities, also known in short as the CRL Rights Commission. After a pastor was recorded spraying doom in people's faces and other incidents, the CRL Rights Commission, you'll remember, started looking into religious abuse and did release a report last year. Thank you all for being with me. Toko, let's start with you. So before we get to those regulatory issues, you've been following the trial in Port Elizabeth. What sort of issues has it raised for you?
I think first and foremost it's the hold religion has on people in terms of religion being abused by others. You find this in many religious settings. You find it in traditional healing, which is linked to African religion. You find it in Christianity, I'm sure even in Islam and in other religions. You'd find such perverts lurking everywhere. But religion creates a very difficult dynamic. When someone says, God said, you must sleep with me. It's God who says that, it's not him. And it complicates issues when you are a good Christian and you're trying to obey God, and this is seen as a man of God. It happens in many circles. It even happens when God said you can eat anything, eat a snake, eat an octopus, eat this, drink jig and bleach. Because you believe, you get abused. That's why when we wrote our report, we said it's commercialization of religion and abuse of people's belief systems. Because what you've seen in court this past week or 2 weeks is what happens when someone abuses your belief systems and brings in the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit into the whole dynamic of his perversion. Then you have a very difficult situation when someone uses your own ancestors to rape you and then says, well, it's the ancestors that led me here. It's the same system. If you believe in ancestors, then you'll say, okay, if that's what my ancestors want, then it's okay.
So this is clearly a charismatic cult leader, which I think you get across organizations, but it surely makes it harder when he says, God tells me. And they believed, the twins who are going to testify against him, saying they believed he was their link to God. Just from a gender perspective, I mean, are you concerned that there are swaths of women, congregants, still supporting him?
So there is a perfect storm here. Our socialization puts women and their roles at a subservient level. And that is the first thing that we have to acknowledge about how women behave towards men. It's all about male-centered views and how women are brought up to be subservient and to be subject of men, and how we raise our boys to believe that women are there to serve them. And then you come into a religion where there is the father and the son, and then you become this special woman that needs to be looked after. And in South Africa, our socio-economic standing as women, if you are growing from a family that has only one person, a mother, as we have seen that mostly South African children are growing with single parents, then you find that the males are the ones who predate on these single women and their children, and they think that they are bringing them the dreams for their lives.
So women are vulnerable, even more vulnerable, possibly in a religious setting. Alexander, we invited you in because you have been willing to speak out against the church in apartheid times. I think you've been willing to deal with difficult issues. Can you tell me first how you feel as a pastor listening to some of what's come out in court?
Well, Francis, to be honest, I'm shamed as a pastor. I'm part of a species called spiritual leaders, and by complicit association, we are guilty as the church and as spiritual leaders, and it's a shame. What to do about it and how to address it, I think the deeper underlying issues of sexism and patriarchy in our nation and how we've been raised, toxic male power over women, young women, and then to add to it the God factor, that people use and abuse God to use and abuse people, and especially young women. It is horrendous. So there is very little one can say in defense of any of this. One can talk constructively from a Christian church point of view of how to address this and collaborate with government and other institutions for the well-being of people in South Africa. All institutions have the good, the bad, and the ugly. And it doesn't mean that all Christian pastors are failures. The sad scandal in the Catholic Church of all the revelations recently that have come out of abuse against children is, again, people blame the Catholics, but it's in most denominations in one form or another. And the question is, how do we as leaders discipline and hold accountable our fellow leaders? And what structures are there available to us to exert authority to bring correction? And of course, in the church, it's notoriously slippery and fluid because people make themselves God over their people, and they play God through this man of God syndrome. And all of the stuff you guys we've mentioned here already tonight, one has to acknowledge it's happening, it's true, it's wrong, it's painful, it's shameful, and we've got to do something about it.
Okay, so I know at least one of you has a potential solution. Toko, you've released that report last year saying there should be regulation.
We released the report last year saying there should be regulation. And that because the Constitution is structured such that the CRL is the authority to monitor, to investigate, to research, and to educate. We said maybe that should come out of those powers. The pastors objected to that. We have said we're willing to hand over everything to you as the church, especially because we shouldn't sketch around the issue that this problem is in Christianity mainly. There could be problems here and there in other places, but it's mainly the Christian family that is unbelievably affected. That let them sort it out. A few weeks ago, we met with critical churches like your ZCC, Shembe, IFCC, SACC, all the big institutions, and we said, we're handing this report over to you. Here is how far we've gone in terms of the code of conduct. We need you now to go to Parliament and say, we need to enforce this code of conduct as the church so that we can hold people accountable. The challenge we have is that there are standalones. If I start up my own church, it's my church with my money. And who will
let's get a
control
view
me?
from a pastor. How do you feel about being regulated?
There is good regulation and there's bad regulation. And it's a matter of what regulation is being recommended. Code of ethics should be across the board in business, politics, spiritual leaders. No one need fear ethics if you are ethically sound. You only fear the law if you have done wrong. So it's what is regulated and to what extent it's regulated. So separation between church and state is an issue in this discussion. And where the middle ground lies of collaboration to hold people accountable, I think that is the place where we can collaborate together. And to hear that the report has been handed over to all of these major... In South Africa, ecumenically, there is the South African Council of Churches and the Evangelical Alliance of South Africa. Most denominations belong to those two ecumenical bodies, but there are standalones who refuse to belong anywhere. And those are the problems, because internal discipline and regulation within denominations works up to a point. You always have the hidden rotten apples, as it were, but it's the standalones that don't submit to any recognized Christian body that then we have to hand over to the government, as it were, to, I think, regulate.
Well, when the whole doom issue came up, I mean, that sparked the investigation. So I want to hear more about your recommendations. But you could say, so that seemed clearly wrong in most people's minds. But some people who don't believe would say, well, the Bible talks about a lot of outlandish things that may not be rational, that may not adhere to sort of our code of ethics.
Okay, that is an excuse for power-hungry men who are insecure. The Bible is fairly clear on the basics of the Christian faith, and some of the more mysterious aspects of miracles and spiritual phenomena, even that we can use the Bible to critique and judge and evaluate spiritual phenomena. And there's spiritual phenomena that's plainly extra biblical. It's not in the Bible. And that must be addressed and confronted. So there is unbiblical spiritual phenomena and there is biblical spiritual phenomena. And eating grass and spraying doom, it's just on a common sense level insane. It's an abuse of power. And those that try to justify it through the Bible, again, they're not in a place where they are in a dialogue with respected others that can rebuke them and hold them accountable. They are in an echo chamber internally of people who agree with them and almost hero worship them. And therefore they become little gods in their domains.
Lulama, what do you think? Are you coming from a gender perspective? What do you think about what you hear?
It's simple. We are a constitutional country. We have a Bill of Rights. All South Africans have indivisible rights. Right to dignity, to privacy, and therefore there is no room for religion to dominate the constitutionality and the values that people already have even before they get into the church.
But you want to protect religious freedom as well.
Religious freedom is subjected to the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights is indivisible. My dignity, my privacy is more important than for me to be degraded and be inside a church. And what we know about church is that that spirit is supposed to set you free. But as we can see here, the spirit is putting this child in bondage. And you see a relaxed pastor who is busy dancing to his own videos. And I think for me, it is still that this man belongs behind bars. Together with all the pastors, we must bring in the Catholics that are raping our young boys. We must bring in the Sangomas who are raping our young girls who are initiates under them. They must go to jail. It's simple. We are a constitutional country.
All right, so we asked for views about whether religious leaders may have undue influence over their congregants. Let's take a listen to some of the comments coming in.
So I'm 28 years old now. I was also assaulted by a bishop in our church, I think in 2009. So the problem was the bishop was my father's friend, and now I couldn't say anything because my father was also a reverend in the same church. So honestly, this trial has really woken up some things that happened to me in the past, and I've never had to say anything till today.
This is the truth, and indeed many people are suffering from the abuse of these so-called men of God. I know of a church that enforces its pastors to do vasectomy so that they cannot have children, and this church, no one touches it.
Sure, so potentially more victims of abuse, people saying things happened in their church. I mean, so do you recognize as a pastor, it sounded like you were, that this could be rife?
How rife it is, obviously we don't know, but it is one bad incident of this nature is one too much. And it is rife, obviously, but what to do about it? I think for me, at core, it's unaccountable leadership. Any leader who's unaccountable and doesn't submit to other peer leaders, don't follow that leader, they're dangerous. So unaccountable leadership is massive. And independents and standalones are dangerous. Don't follow them. Don't join them. Unfortunately,
so what you're saying, it's safer to be part of a big sort of network of churches. But then what about the Catholics?
All I wanted to come in here is that we have seen that women that are raped inside the churches, as much as we're saying they are standalones and every other people that are organized, I beg to differ with that, because when we actually do the counseling in church, we tell women, go back to this husband that is busy abusing you or raping you. We're telling women, please pray more. Pray more. This thing is going to disappear. And for me, this is the crux of the matter. So whether you are standalone or you are organized, you need to be accountable to the laws of the country. And therefore, we support our sister that is saying, our sister commission, that regulate. If you don't want to regulate, then the state must do something to protect women who are in the churches, because the state has an obligation to protect women.
Well, Toko, what did you find? I mean, is this a crazy incident, a crazy pastor, or are you hearing stories?
We're hearing shocking stories throughout the country, actually. I think it's the power people have. Once you say to people, God talks to me, he speaks to me now and then. You know, last night God told me that there are blessings coming to you, but you need to do this and this and this with me. You're standing in a very difficult situation as a congregant, and that is very rife. We've had women who are married who have come to us and said, this pastor said I was going to get babies, I wasn't getting babies, but I must first sleep with him. That's how he's going to heal me. And you don't tell your husband, you don't tell your in-laws, you don't tell anybody. So you remain with this huge scar of having been duped into having sex with this man. And they're coming saying, I can't go to the police, I can't do anything, I just needed a space to vent. So it's much more rife than people think. These are exceptional young women who have decided we're going to stand against this man no matter what. They're an exception to the rule. They're not the rule itself.
Let's bring up a tweet, because you've said this before. Basically, don't believe anyone who says God says. If we can bring that up, you are quoted there. Let's educate our people that no one talks to God. Let's just put it as bluntly as all of that. If someone says God is talking to me, they need to go to the psychiatric ward. But the Bible is full of God talking to people. So you're now saying that can't be true.
You see, it's true in the Bible. Moses, you know, those were phenomena that had to be recorded in the Bible. It's not as if God every morning was waking up and saying, hey, how are you doing, Moses? Today, what are you going to have for lunch? These people are talking to God every day.
So Alexander, she's suggesting a lot of Christians are a little bit cuckoo.
Liars are very cuckoo.
Just like the Sangomas.
Yes.
Sangomas also have things that they hear. They will tell you, this is what I hear. And these people, they should be careful of what they are listening to. And I think the pastor can say, you must have a discerning spirit, right?
Absolutely.
And if you are having a congregant that cannot even differentiate between what God is saying or the ancestor is saying, then you will find a predator lurking in that space.
But this is something you can't regulate. How do you know?
Yeah, well said, and I agree with you. Paul teaches in the New Testament to the church at Corinth that every prophecy, a prophecy is a so-called word from God, must be tested, must be accountable, and again, unaccountable leadership claims this God language to themselves, and they don't hold themselves accountable to anyone, and when people hold them accountable, then they condemn them by saying God's going to punish you. I have it on good record that in Port Elizabeth, Pastor Omotoso said pastors in Port Elizabeth who don't want to receive him and disagree with him, God will strike them down dead.
Sure.
I have that on record from pastors in Port Elizabeth. And some pastors made known to their congregations, don't go to these meetings of Pastor Omotoso. So this use and abuse of power and of God language, and God spoke to me, whereby you can't be corrected, you can't be challenged, it can't be examined or tested if it's true, if it really is God or your own imagination, or it's a manipulation to get the person to do what you want them to do. So that is the problem. How do we hold leaders accountable? And if necessary, it must be handed over to the government for regulation. Internal processes within churches, within the Catholic Church, they are hopefully going to institute regulations and systems that hold priests very accountable. Likewise, every evangelical, charismatic, Pentecostal church ought to do the same. And those outside of those institutions, God knows, and maybe the government must help. But even then, we are still not guaranteed that some will still not do it, because the grooming goes on for years in the hidden, dark places where few see. And these young women are being unbelievably courageous to stand up and speak out. Cheryl Zondi is unbelievably courageous to speak out the way she is. So we must honor them and salute them, and hopefully more speak out, and we take the wraps off. What happens in darkness must be shouted from the rooftops.
Well, it sounds like even from those comments, maybe more coming through, people looking at their history and saying, we're running out of time. So Toko, so where is this all going? You're saying you're trying to regulate, there's pushback from church leaders. Is it possible to regulate and allow the constitutional right for freedom of religion as well?
It's possible to regulate. We studied the system, we spoke to victims, we spoke to their parents. As you say, people get groomed, but your family is out there knowing you are being groomed. And we've said if there's a peer review mechanisms where your family can go there and say something untoward is happening with that pastor. And if the pastor has a license to operate, and you discover as a peer review committee that something really is happening with that person, you simply take the license away. And you see,
so you're actually encouraging self-regulation.
We're talking self-regulation with no government involved, but in order to enforce the ethical leadership principles, there needs to be a stick somewhere, and the stick can only come from Parliament. There's nowhere else where the stick can come from. So that if you do wrong, then you can be punished effectively. But also, secondly, even these young women, some of them that we have spoken to, they've said, because they were saying God will punish you, and I've said to them, if there was a committee of Bishop Tutu, Pastor Ray McCall, and all the other people, would you have gone there? yes, we would have gone there because then they would have protected us from the wrath of God. Now, they didn't know, it's not the police station that will help you when Omotoso says, you're going to die.
Yeah.
God is going to strike you. It's other peers who will say, there is nothing like that. Let's pray my child will be fine. We'll take you to the police station to report him and will be safe. It's only that self-regulatory system that's going to protect young girls and women and even boys. Some of them are not gender specific. You know, they abuse boys. It's just that for boys, it's much more difficult to come forward. But we've seen boys, we've heard from boys who have been abused by these pastors.
Okay, I'm going to give you the last word, Lulama, and maybe a message, I don't know, you're saying boys, but maybe a message to women. So we saw it, ANC leaders criticized for supporting Jacob Zuma. We've seen women often come out when other women are trying to speak out and saying, no, that's not okay. Is this a religious thing or is this a South African thing?
It's called gender. It's a social construct. This is how we have been brought up. And therefore, we will always be, as women, at loggerheads with understanding where the country is going, which is called gender equality, and understanding our socialization. And to our girls, because they are going through until December, we are having a listening brief as the Gender Commission. We have taken the lawyer to his lawyer society, and we are going to be challenging every other thing that is outside the prescript. So we believe them, and we are behind them.
All right, this has been great for me. Thank you all for being here. Lulama Nair, Chair of the Commission for Gender Equality, Alexander Fenter, Pastor at the Vineyard Christian Fellowship, and Toko Mkwanazi Alova, forgive me, Chair of the CRL Rights Commission in short. Thank you for all being with us.
Thank you.